Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Breareos Kerensky and welcome to the review of Dark Witch Story Episode 2, the sequel to the 2014 action platformer by Inside Systems. Dark Witch Story 2 takes the basic premise of the first game and improves on almost every aspect, though there are still some shortcomings. The game will reach Western 3DS eShops in 2016, and for those that cannot wait, the Japanese version includes English and Chinese text. I can't vouch for the Chinese translation, but the English is okay, with a few typos and layout errors here and there.
あとはリアーナに潜んでるゲルマ側の人間が邪魔ね。
After defeating Princess Riva and recovering the stolen Siga crystals, a new problem soon arises for Zizou Olympia. The nation of Germa starts to harness the power of the crystals to wage war against neighboring countries. Zizou sets forth to stop these efforts, a travel that will make her face new and old enemies. Story segments are now fully voiced and have more illustrations, giving a new edge to the game's presentation.
それじゃあ行きますか。
The whole game structure is a tweaked version of the first game. Players can still freely select stages, and should they defeat the local boss, Zizou will grab her power to more easily defeat others. Defeated enemies release Tres, used to improve Zizou's abilities during or between stages. Pure Siga crystals are still scattered throughout the stages, but there are now 4 in each and no longer work as fixed enhancements. The biggest change is the new charge bar. Every weapon, even the starting line, consumes a portion of this bar. Boss weapons no longer consume Tres, allowing Zizou to keep all her abilities. The bar recharges over time. Spamming the standard attack barely affects the available charge, but boss weapons do, requiring timing and precision to avoid wasting precious energy. This change also allows to experiment with weapons during stages and boss fights without being penalized and deters weapon spamming, something particularly true in Lunatic mode.
それで終わりか。
All characters have a revenge attack, a more powerful version of their basic weapon. The meter for the revenge attack fills as someone takes damage, and you can expect bosses to use them almost constantly during their final moments. Collected Tres and pure Siga crystals can be used in Papernes and Dal's shops. In addition to extra lives, health, or collected Tres per enemy, it's possible to permanently rise a slot maximum level or even customize said slot. For example, Zizou can trade her wing ability for a dash, or the comet shot for a chargeable short-range attack. Boss weapons can be improved by having them consume less charge bar or by extending their effects. Some of these upgrades, like the dash, are actually required to get some of the pure Siga crystals and can change the way stages are played. Al sells special abilities and forbidden techniques to make Zizou's task easier. Forbidden techniques are a big crutch to rely on, like double damage, and if purchased will stop players from earning achievements for that playthrough. Stages have improved dramatically, both in design and visual complexity. Due to their design, stages encourage players to only attack when enemies are on screen, and even then carefully husband their shots to avoid destroying useful platforms or activating traps. Unfortunately, a lot of the new stages are more linear, with toned-down platforming. Only a handful of stages feature multiple ways to get through them or hard-to-reach alcoves with secrets, a disappointing choice.
うわー、こいつかよ。苦手なんだよな。
Bosses are still incredibly cool, each with their own peculiar attack pattern. Some of them come from the previous game, like Clincy, with a different sprite, improved animations, and different attacks. After defeating the initial 8 Germa researchers, 4 extra characters come into play before facing the final boss, again a 2-stage fight preceded by a boss rush. Dark Witch Story 2 is still incredibly fun to play, but I have the overall feeling that it's easier than its predecessor. On one hand, the game is essentially unchanged, and the experience from the first game helps a lot. On the other hand, truly dangerous stages and bosses appear only during the second part of the game. Using the correct weapon makes boss fights trivial, and only a couple make an inventive use of boss weapons, against Kuito and Rudy. In these fights, boss weapons aren't simply a tool to inflict more damage, but rather a way to stop some of their techniques. In Rudy's case, the fight also requires to correct time the attack, making it the most enjoyable in the whole game. Inside systems also rename difficulty modes. Normal mode is now expert, easy is casual. For some reason there's also a very easy mode that I find completely superfluous, as casual allows player to go through stages essentially unopposed. Lunatic is still present of course, and in the bonus menu there is also a dangerous mode to increase damage taken for those really looking for a challenge. While players have all the tools to make the game harder, I would have liked a more demanding approach for stages and boss design right from the start. But then again, this might be due to me having played the first game a lot on 2 different systems. I'm not saying that Dark Witch Story 2 can be completed without dying on the first go by veterans, but I'd have gone for an harder basic design nonetheless. Performing certain tasks, like defeating bosses without taking damage and no special weapons, or completing the game without upgrades, unlocks sketches in a rather large art gallery. About that, my only gripe is that the bottom screen is left unused and you can't zoom in or hide the interface. As with the first game, completing the game once unlocks a second character. This time it's Sora, one of the bosses from the first game. While she's not as diverse from Zizou like Riva was, she still offers her own attacks and movement methods, along with a revamped Pure Sika Crystal locations, custom slots and new final boss. What the game really nails down is the music. From the splash screen to credits roll, Dark Witch Story 2 is full of incredibly catchy tunes that just won't leave your head, and it's one of the few games where you'll want to turn down sound effects so they won't hide the various tracks. Voices fit their characters perfectly, and there are extra short comical skits about bosses after defeating them.
特に感想はないんだけど。もうどっか行け！楽ぞ！っていなくなってる！もう引きこもる！
Graphics have received a boost as well, with much more elaborate stages and even cuter animations for bosses and enemies. A couple of locations have slowdown problems if Zizou spams attacks, but the rest of the game is rock solid and never misses a frame. There is a rare bug where music cuts out after finishing a loop, but I've never been able to willingly reproduce it. Nevertheless, Dark Witch Story 2 is a joy to both eyes and ears, a truly lovable game to behold. The bonus menu where to purchase aids make its return, along the poker minigame to pile up Siga for that menu or even unlock image galleries, if a task proves too difficult. In addition to poker, there is also Siga Cha and Rudy Mikal. In Siga Cha you can use Siga or 3DS tokens to unlock sprites for a second gallery. Rudy Mikal is a small rhythmic game where Rudy has to slash balls timed with a song chosen by the player. While not a full-blown rhythmic game, Rudy Mikal is an excellent addition to the main game, and along Sega Cha makes great use of existing assets to make Dark Witch Story 2 more appealing than it already is. Dark Witch Story 2 might be more of the same, but it's more of the same done right. It is bigger and better than the original, improving on the few snags the first game had. Dark Witch Story 2 might feel easy to veterans of the first game, and whether this is a deliberate design choice or simply players' experience is up for debate, but the fact that Dark Witch Story 2 is an incredibly fun, well done and addicting game remains. In short, you have to buy Dark Witch Story 2. I hope you have enjoyed this review and you'll stick around for more. Briarios Kerensky, over and out.